I am super excited for this episode today because we are focusing in on self-defense, but also fight tactics. More specifically, how come UFC fighters do it one way? Why do they have certain tactics that they utilize which don't seem to translate over to street fighting? And a lot of times people go, oh, UFC, it's the closest thing to street fighting. So you think a crossover in tactics would be similar? And you might watch a UFC fight and then see a street fight and go, that wasn't even kind of similar. So today we're gonna break down 4 points, 4 questions that a subscriber had and sent to me in relation to tactics and fighting in the cage versus in the street. The very first question that we have in regards to why are fight tactics different from UFC to the street is feints. Question goes on to say many self-defense related websites recommend not using feints in street fights and regards it as unnecessary moves that increase risk. But sometimes UFC fighters use them in matches for reasons I am unable to comprehend. So, main question, are feints actually realistic, useful, in street fights? The very first thing that we have to recommend, which probably pertains to all the questions which are going to come up today, we have 3 more to answer after this, is we have trained individuals versus people on the street. When you are trained, you can do so much more. Not only because you understand more about fight sports, but also you are going to be more calm. When you are calm, it's like your brain is just big, fat, working. When you're scared and nervous, the way somebody will be in a street fight, it's just going to be like, whoop, and your brain is not going to be working whatsoever. That's not to take away from the fact that fighting in a cage is not scary. It absolutely is, but these fighters have done it time and time and time again, and that experience opens up into you being able to utilize things like feints. So you will absolutely see UFC fighters on the outside twitching, trying to give little pops, trying to make their opponent react. And in these moments, they are reading what the person across from them is doing. I could pump my hip and go, oh, okay, he checked. But as he checked, he dropped his hands. He went like this. So next time I'm gonna fake low, but actually kick high. And they're looking for these little errors in their opponent. If a website or somebody online says, okay, you don't wanna utilize feints in a street fight, it's number 1 gonna be because you're not experienced and advanced enough to understand that maybe a quick little twitch is not gonna help you figure out what this guy's gonna do. And in addition, if you happen to move forward as you feint, as we often do in fight sports, you're gonna put yourself within punch range. So that might be the risk. But overall, feints are so effective, and I would not advise somebody to remove them from a situation in a street fight, as long as you have some experience, because what should happen is you'll be here, you'll be standing, you should be out of range, right? I'm not within range of this jab landing, so I twitch, and I see what this guy does, and he might just do something ridiculous like put both hands up, or kind of like that, and either of those is gonna set up your backhand, which will maybe, if their arms go up, you can boom down to the body, or if for some reason they close their eyes and lean away, you can follow with the other one. This is something which just most people are not capable of doing on the street because, let's be realistic, they're not going to be calm. They already probably don't even know how to throw a real punch. But this tactic 100% works in fight sports. Many of the very best people in the world utilize feints so much. I'm going to say something like 50% of their movement from the upper body, let's say, in terms of when they extend their hands slightly away, is going to be a feint. It'll be a punch, 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 a feint, a twitch. You're always moving your hands, twitch, twitch, hit, boom. And that's high volume faking and feinting, which is going to lead the opponent across from them to not really understand when the attack is going to come. It keeps them on the edge all the time, which makes it even more difficult for your opponent to commit forward. So yes, 100% you should be using feints. And I want to take a quick pause to thank the sponsor of this episode, Fume. As many of you guys know, I'm an advocate for eliminating bad habits out of your life. But very often that is difficult, and it is much easier to replace your bad habit with a good habit. Fume is an innovative, award-nominated device that does just that. Instead of electronics, Fume is completely natural. Instead of vapor, fume uses flavored air, and instead of harmful chemicals, fume uses all natural, delicious flavors. You guys get it? Instead of bad, fume is good. It's a habit you are free to enjoy and makes replacing your bad habit so much easier. Your fume comes with an adjustable airflow dial and is designed with movable parts and magnets for fidgeting, giving your fingers a lot to do, which is helpful for de-stressing and anxiety while breaking your habit. There are a number of exciting core packets to keep your fume exciting, flavorful. You can change it up all the time. Fume has served over 100,000 customers and has thousands of success stories, and there's no reason that can't be you. To get your own fume, you can head over to tryfume.com/Gabriel Varga, or you can scan that QR code and you can use my promo code Gabriel Varga to save 10%. That's tryfum.com/Gabriel Varga and save an additional 10% today. Next question is variation in technique. While standing, it says, there seems to be very little variation in technique during UFC fights while standing, mostly jabs, punches to the left or right temple or the stomach, abdomen. Is there an optimal technique for street fights? Or should one use a combination of punches, elbow strikes, palm strikes, and brachial stuns? Not even sure what a brachial stun is. Should probably know that, but I don't. So variation, let's be real. In a street fight, you're gonna probably, I don't really understand that question, because in a street fight, I'm gonna say 9 out of 10 times people are gonna come with big, rounded sort of shots, and it's just gonna be big and sloppy. You're not gonna see somebody go, okay, jab to the body cross, and then come up with an elbow, and then go to a spinning technique. That's not gonna happen. Variation is always great. But in a fight, you should be changing things up constantly, because if you just throw the jab, and you throw the jab, and you throw it again, like the 4th, 5th time you throw it, they're gonna parry and they're gonna counter because you're too predictable. Not being predictable is fantastic, and that's why those feints are so great. If you are somebody who has a fantastic jab, you stick the jab, you feint the jab, you stick the jab a couple times, you feint the jab, you're always keeping them off rhythm and off point. But again, the more you can switch things up, the angles and the heights, the harder it's gonna be for them to know what's coming next. In a street fight, very often it's probably best to have 1 or 2 main shots, main attacks that you know work very well, that have a high probability of landing, because you do not want street fights to go long. It's much harder to finish a fight with a professional quickly. But when you're looking at somebody who has limited experience and there's no rules and there's no ref to get you off or to get them off you, you want to make sure you're finishing this as quick as you can. So if I know my cross is dynamite punch, I don't need to be worrying about, okay, I'm going to throw this and this and this and this. I'm just going to be coming, okay, my hand's here, and if he attacks me, I'm going to step back and hit him, or I'm going to be feinting, I'm going to look for that opening and hit him with my one really good punch. And most people on the street will not have defense for that punch. All you have to do is have that accuracy and that timing to throw it and have it land probably just once. So variation in a UFC fight, super important, integral. In the street, 1 or 2 really good techniques, I think, is enough. Moving on to question number 3, defense and offense. The UFC fighters seem to exchange punches blindly a lot, and the results sometimes depend on who is throwing the most punches. Is it the same in a street fight? They end significantly quicker, question mark. Is it advisable to counter this type of continuous punching with sidestepping and counter attacks? So the first thing is, I would not say more often than not, you're going to see a UFC fighter exchanging blindly. It might look like that to the average person, but when they jump in and they start throwing, they're not just going 100% offense. Like, it does happen occasionally, but the high level people are going to be throwing and they're going to be blocking or rolling, anticipating what they need to do for defense as well. So it's not just, I'm jumping in and I'm going to throw and whoever lands first is going to go down. Don't get me wrong, those fights do happen and many people love those fights. But when you see most of them, they're a little bit more detailed than that. Again, to the average person, you might not see it, but when I watch, I go, okay, I see their eyes on point. They're not just going like this, looking at the ground, swinging blindly. They are focused. Now, one of the big things to focus on from that question is volume, jumping in and throwing, gonna win you a fight? Very often, the answer is yes. We do have some fighters people like Conor McGregor, who are fantastic counterpunchers. And you could probably come and throw 50 punches at them and they might get off 5, but they have a good chance of finishing the fight because they're moving, they're making things miss, they're blocking, and when they do hit their counter shot, it is very dangerous. But aside from those particular fighters, volume very often is going to help you win fights because when you throw more, you're going to land more, and these combinations are very, very dangerous. Does this idea work in a street fight? Absolutely. If you can step forward and get off 10 shots by the time the other guy throws 1 shot because he's being too defensive, chances are you're going to break through that guard or whatever weak defense they have, and you're going to land something that's very damaging. And that could be enough to end the fight. So while I wouldn't recommend for street fighting somebody just diving in and just blindly throwing shots, I do think that yes, volume is going to be in your favor. And then the final question, is it advisable to counter this type of offense with sidestepping, with movement? 100%. If you're in a street fight or in the ring and somebody is coming just and you stand there and you don't have really crazy solid defense, especially if you don't have some bigger glove, it's not going to be advisable to stand there and take it. But if you can make people miss, you can angle off, that is going to be the smartest defense which you can possibly implement. And in a street fight, you really want to be doing that. I would almost say in a street fight, I would advise movement, obviously during that movement, trying to stop the fight from happening, but then picking your 1 shot and landing. So overall, I would say in the ring, generally with people who are high skill level, yes, combinations and volume is going to be advantageous. Being out in the street, I don't necessarily know. If somebody's being very aggressive, very wild, throwing big shots, but you can just move, and then land your big one, I feel like that is the way to go. And the final thing which we are talking about today is speed versus strength. Some matches include both sides throwing comparatively slow but powerful punches. Are these punches more useful than punches that emphasize speed in street fights? And can one counter them with fast punches? Well, very often, when we see heavyweights, yes, they will end up it kind of looks like that, but I don't ever watch the lighter guys and go, wow, that looks really, really slow. But there are times where they draw the speed down a little bit. And guess what? Yes, speed will be able to beat that power. Not if you're going shot for shot, like they both land at the same time. Obviously, the guy who hits harder is going to win there. But if you're able to be the person who can utilize all the other tactics that we already mentioned, especially the footwork, and then you're able to pick a shot off. And that's going to be what's going to really allow you to dominate the fight. And remember, power is not necessarily me going like, like that. Power is 2 main elements. Number 1, we have the speed. Pop, huh. And number 2, we have the follow through. So I hit and I follow through. Same way that if I take a pencil and a hurricane picks up this pencil and whips it along, it can get embedded into a tree. The only thing going for it there was it wasn't slowing down when it hit the tree, and number 2, it was going fast. So if we can have this happen when we throw punches, we can create enormous amounts of power while still being very, very quick. And if we remember to rechamber our hand as fast as it goes out, then all of a sudden we have a very crisp punch which doesn't leave me exposed the same way big hard punches will. So I would advise in a street fight, as long as your speed punches are not just little tap, tap, taps, if you're just tapping the person, you're just gonna make them angry. Yes, focus on speed, but focus on the follow through, and you probably don't need to knock somebody out necessarily. If you hit them a couple times, bam, bam, and that's all they feel, don't, there's a good chance the fight's just gonna be done there and you can just scoot out, walk away, and they're not gonna follow because they already got peppered a few times. That is a fantastic strategy. And if somebody does come with big, slow, hard punches, yes, absolutely, that gives you enormous amounts of time to counter. But again, we have to remember that not everybody on the street is trained the same way as a UFC fighter. And if somebody comes in with big, hard punches, there's a good chance that you can't go like, oh, miss, hit, miss. It's not gonna happen. But I still think that speed over power, or at least intentional, I'm gonna hit you as hard as I can, slow power, speed is still the stronger attribute to have. So those were 4 fantastic questions on self-defense, street fighting versus trained in the ring MMA fighters. And it got me thinking, this episode. Just lots of good questions, and I appreciate that. If you guys have your own questions on street fights, or any other thing you want me to cover on this channel, drop it in the comments below. As always guys, train hard. I'll see you back here soon for another video.